Venezuela's main opposition alliance announced it would take part in November's elections and in a 3-year boycott. About 5 million Cuban citizens will be vaccinated by late November, as health officials plan to immunize over 90% of the population. President Putin said that the United States' 20-year-long military presence in Afghanistan ended only in tragedies. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, this is from the South. I'm Ray Gomez. We begin in Venezuela, where the main opposition alliance announced on Tuesday it would take part in November's elections, ending a 3-year boycott. In a statement, the opposition alliance said it would participate in the November 21st elections for mayors and state governors. The announcement comes as opposition sectors and executive continue talks hosted by Mexico and with mediation by Norway in a bid to solve the political crisis that has seen major attempts at the stabilization and plots to overthrow the democratically elected government of President Nicolas Maduro. The Democratic Unity Roundtable coalition boycotted the 2018 presidential vote that saw Maduro re-elected and the 2020 legislative elections in which the opposition lost control of parliament. In both cases, it dismissed the elections as fraudulent without any evidence and as part of a long-running refusal to recognize the Maduro government.
And although I cannot speak for the other political organizations, I can say they have had a consultative process. It has been profound, extended, and as much as we have been cautious and even somewhat embarrassed to say it publicly for fear of criticism, insults, and offenses, we thought about it very well before participating. We took a step forward, and we are going to participate on November 21st.
The Venezuelan head of state welcomed the opposition's recent decision.
The political gesture of participating in the elections again is to be applauded. With the weight of the Constitution and justice on the one hand, and with the weight of democracy and inclusive dialogue on the other, we have been building this path.
President Maduro also informed that he will send a request to Mexico and demand the recovery of the national economy and will ask for the lifting of all sanctions.
That is why Venezuela will submit in Mexico, in the second round of negotiations with Guaido-allied opposition, a strong petition with all the economic demands for the recovery of the country's economy, the return of the gold stolen in London and bank accounts in the world, and the lifting of all sanctions against PDVSA.
In other news, President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, presented his third government report from the National Palace. The Mexican head of state said he was satisfied with his management, but recognized that challenges derived from the pandemic. He underlined the economic recovery of the country after the fall that occurred in 2020. Heading toward the second period of his presidency, López Obrador also stated that corruption is the pandemic of pandemics. According to various polls, 60% of the population approve of AMLO administration. And Bolivian coup leaders would have launched a projectile against the Mexican Air Force plane in which former President Evo Morales was rescued in November 2019. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador comments on this in his most recent book. In it, a document from Mexico's national defense states that the Air Force expressed their suspicions back then that a rocket was fired against the aircraft, adding that while in the airport, the Bolivian armed forces constantly pointed an RPG rocket launcher at the plane. The president of Peru, Pedro Castillo, said that those who criticize his cabinet should join him to find solutions for the real problems affecting the country. The statement was made by the head of state while participating in the delivery of 110 bioclimatic houses for residents in Mazamari district. The event also saw the presence of ministers of defense, housing, construction, sanitation, and culture. The statement's response to the recent heavy critics of opposition sectors to his cabinet choices, forcing some of Castillo's ministers to resign. During his speech, President Castillo emphasized that those who criticize his administration by qualifying it as incapable seek to remove his cabinet so their allies can conclude with corrupt people. The Peruvian head of state also reaffirmed his government will work for the people and not behind closed doors.
When the men below, those in Yankee, those in hats, assume responsibility, today they came and say we are not capable, that we are in misgovernment. They do not want us to take money from the corrupt. Today they want to oust our ministers, to put their allies, those who have colluded with their companies, those who have corrupted the country.
Former First Lady of Haiti, Martine Moïse, affirmed that she wishes to run for the presidency of the Republic and also asked the international community to help speed up the proceedings to find those responsible for the assassination of her husband, Jovenel Moïse. Martine Moïse, who was injured in the early hours of July 7 when the assassination of the Haitian president took place, affirms that her country is in a serious crisis due to the recent earthquake, in addition to hunger, diseases, and gang violence in the streets. The former First Lady revealed that she had conversations with the FBI and affirms that the financiers of her husband's crime will be known. Although 17 Colombian mercenaries have been arrested in connection with the crime, the investigations on the Caribbean country have been marred by threats, the resignation of the judge handling the case, and the lack of interest of the government led by Prime Minister Ariel Henry, who is more focused on the electoral process than on the investigation of the murder. A survey by the firm MIR Consultores revealed this Tuesday that the Sandinista National Liberation Front leads the vote on intention in the central north region of Nicaragua, with a wide difference before its closest opponents, with a view to the general elections on November 7. The consultation was carried out on a universe of 3,400 people under the randomized method. The results of the test revealed that about 47% of those surveyed will vote for the Sandinista Front in an invariable way, a category that qualifies as the hot vote. 14.6% of the population is also likely to vote for the Sandinista Front, being this category located in the so-called soft vote. The study also affirms that young people between 16 and 20 years of age are the sector of the population that most supports the party of President Daniel Ortega. The study assures that 72.3% of those polled will vote and only 27.7% will abstain. The consulting firm MIR places the favorability indexes in terms of confidence, tranquility, and hope at over 70%. We'll be right back after this very short break. Welcome back. Cuban health authorities confirmed that as of Wednesday, about 5 million citizens will be vaccinated, and by the end of November, 92% of the population will be immunized against COVID-19. This was announced by Dr. Ileana Morales, Director of Science and Technological Innovation of the Cuban Ministry of Health, at the meeting between the President, Miguel Diaz-Canel, as well as scientists and experts who are participating in the crusade against the pandemic. At the meeting where a new vaccination schedule was presented, it was also reported that as of Tuesday, 3,060,000 Cubans have been complemented the 3-dose schemes with the anti-COVID jabs domestically produced, Abdala, Soberana O2, and Soberana Plus.
We have to say that this is an intense work. We are holding meetings every afternoon, every night, but this is a challenge that we can meet. We are prepared because we have hundreds of vaccination centers, hundreds of people prepared. We are organized. The conditions are there, and there will be doses. By the end of September, all the population ready to be vaccinated will receive at least their first dose.
At the meeting, those responsible for the manufacture of the anti-COVID drugs in Cuba also guaranteed the availability of the doses to cover the new schedule. This was confirmed by Dr. Eduardo Martinez Diaz, president of BioCuba Pharma.
All the vaccines that are required there, which Ileana has mentioned, are either already manufactured or are in the process of being released, or the ingredient is manufactured to make a spill. So there is already a very high probability of having all the vaccines in the month of September.
And schools in China welcomed the news master on Wednesday by beginning a new academic season as they finish up preparations to defend against the COVID-19 infectious chain. Our schools authorities focus on prevention and control measures to ensure the news master runs as positively as possible, stressing tasks like disinfection and the need for ventilated spaces while setting up inspection groups. Although some areas are still not open for the new educational year due to the harsh impact of COVID-19, many cities have reopened high school and elementary teaching, even kindergarten, with very strict abidance of health protocols. Not only is e-learning applied to contain the spread of a disease, the vaccinations show promising results, as so far over 100,000 faculty members from Hefei City, capital of the eastern Anhui province, already benefited from being immunized, according accounting for 98% of educational staff.
The city's Education Bureau has established 10 inspection groups. Counties also set up inspection groups as part of the efforts to supervise preparation progress of each and every primary and secondary school as well as kindergarten. The inspection will focus on epidemic prevention and control measures, campus closed-loop management, tracing of health conditions of teachers and students, and the preparation of COVID-19 prevention medical supplies on campus.
The World Meteorological Organization said that the number of people displaced by disasters is almost getting larger than the number of people displaced by conflicts.
People were displaced by disasters last year. Now the number of people who are displaced by disaster is almost getting larger than the number of people displaced by conflict. People pushed into poverty because of disasters. Even before COVID-19, this was 26 million people per year. And of course, the number of people who go into hunger is increasing. And now with COVID and extreme weather events attacking us at the same time, we live in this, what we call the multi-hazard world.
Of course, the key priority for the welfare of mankind is to mitigate the climate change. So that's essential. But besides that, we have to adapt to climate change, and especially the richer countries have better means to adapt to climate change.
More than 3 million people have been affected by the annual monsoon floods as the region rains affect eastern India, with villagers fleeing to higher ground and wildlife sanctuaries underwater. Monsoons are crucial to replenishing water supplies after the scorching summer season, but also cause widespread death and destruction across South Asia each year. Experts said the storms have been worsened by climate change. In Bihar and Assam states, incessant rains have hit for the week, with swollen rivers bursting their banks and stranding thousands of people in villages. Authorities reported that more than 3.2 million people in over 2,000 villages in Bihar have been impacted by the rising waters since last week, and around 43 people have died since the start of the monsoon season.
We are suffering greatly. It is difficult to get food, drinking water, and other essential items. Many villagers do not have their own boats, so people are suffering. 80% of Pobitara Wildlife Sanctuary is under floodwater, 17 anti-poaching camps are underwater, and if the floodwater keeps rising like this, we have to evacuate a few camps. All the wild animals are taking shelter on the higher lands in the sanctuary.
Alleging security and prevention reasons, Latia Cantrell, mayor of New Orleans, declared a curfew on Tuesday. Louisiana's main city, damaged by the passing of Hurricane Ida, is on a time-limit lockdown system, while power outages have been reported in 90% of its territory. At a press conference, Cantrell announced that the initiative was taken to prevent a potential delinquency wave due to a surge in looting and property damages that occurred immediately after the passing of Ida. Police forces will patrol, seeing that no one is in the streets from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. Other than Louisiana, the state of Mississippi was also affected by Hurricane Ida and left without functions of most of its power supply network. We have more stories coming up after this final short break. President Vladimir Putin criticized the United States' involvement in Afghanistan, saying that this 20-year-long military presence in the Central Asian country ended only in tragedies. Putin's statements came as he spoke to teenagers to mark the start of a new school year in Russia.
U.S. troops were present on that territory of Afghanistan for 20 years, and over those 20 years, they were trying, this can be said without offending anyone, to civilize the local people, but in fact to impose the norms and standards of life in the broadest sense of this word, including political organizations of society. The only result is tragedies and losses for those who were doing that, for the United States, and especially for the people who live on the territory of Afghanistan. This is a serious result, if not negative.
Despite the chaotic scenes to the contrary, U.S. President Joe Biden claimed Tuesday that he was ready for every eventuality in the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. Speaking one day after the last U.S. troops left Kabul, Biden defended his decision to leave the Asian country, describing it as the best decision for America. The mandatory claim to U.S. had to shift its original goal in Afghanistan by hunting down Osama bin Laden. Nevertheless, he stressed that the terrorist threat has changed since then, and the U.S. will maintain its fight against it, but without the need to fight a ground war to do it. Something that has been clearly seen already as the U.S. used drones to strike ISIS-K targets, with 10 members of one family, including 7 children, killed in one such strike last Sunday. Despite the rhetoric, more foreign intervention led by the U.S. can be expected in the ravaged country. And despite the uncertain future that many Afghans face in the aftermath of the Taliban takeover, there's something true. The Islamist insurgents now have military equipment to not only control the population, but to attack counter-factions. The logistic power was displayed on Wednesday when the Taliban staged a parade showcasing some of the military hardware they captured during their takeover after President Joe Biden defended his decision to end the 2-decade war in Afghanistan. Forbes reports that the U.S. has provided an estimated $83 billion in training and equipment to Afghan security forces since 2001, when the U.S. invaded. The North American country also spent $28 billion in weapons from 2002 to 2017, and $147 million in drones. U.S. Government Accountability Office reported that between 2003 and 2016, the U.S. purchased and provided about 76,000 combat, mine-resistant, and health assistance vehicles and 208 aircraft to the Afghan army and security forces. Despite the Taliban lacks trained pilots, aircraft parts are valuable and can be used to fund other weapons and resources. U.S. Spanish naval station Rota began the process of transporting Afghan citizens to the United States on Tuesday, carrying the first group of 350 people, while 100 more get ready to head toward the Dulles Airport in Virginia. The Embassy of the United States in Madrid explained that the base, used jointly by forces from the U.S. and Spain, harbors 700 Afghan asylum seekers, mostly foreign army collaborators and their families, who arrived last week on Spanish ground after an agreement was reached between Washington and Madrid through their coordinated actions in NATO. The Afghan citizens who fled the country after the Taliban takeover and the stirring promoted by Western media are to be relocated across all of the United States once they arrive. The ending of the extraction and withdrawal operations in Afghanistan on Wednesday is the first step toward a restabilization process in the Central Asian country. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi called for close cooperation with Nicaragua and international organizations in order to nullify the United States sanctions. On a telephone conversation with his Nicaraguan counterpart, Daniel Ortega, the Iranian president stressed the need for close cooperation between Tehran and Managua in the international arena to nullify the U.S. sanctions. He also stated that his government's foreign policy favors the expansion of ties with Latin American and Caribbean countries. The Nicaraguan head of state gave an assurance that his country will keep enhancing relations with Iran. And Cuban music mourns this Wednesday the death of Cuban composer and band leader Adalberto Alvarez, known as the Caballero del Sun. Founder of two of the most successful Cuban bands of all times for more than 4 decades, he had remained in the preference of Cuban dance in public. Adalberto Alvarez studied at the National School of Art, the ANA. He was professor of musical literature in Camagüey, the Cuban province that also saw his debut as the paila player in 1957. Later, he was the arranger and director of the band of his father, Enrique Alvarez. In 1978, at the suggestion of composer Rodolfo Vaillant, he founded Son 14, a group that debuted in Santiago de Cuba in November of the same year. In 1984, his second group, Adalberto Alvarez y su Son, debuted in Santiago de Las Vegas in Havana. TeleSUR pays homage to this prominent Cuban musician with one of his speeches. Y que tú quieres que te den is the title of this piece. And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at TeleSUR English. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. So we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I am Ray Gomez. I thank you for watching.